Is. All right, so Federico, welcome back.
Hello.
So I had the chance, so I've been connected with Federico over last 1.5 years, I think. And I have the honor to meet him in person in Marseille in our headquarters for the Whopper. For those who are not familiar with Federico is the co-founder and COO of Abstracta, and he just moved from Uruguay to San Francisco. So I hope that you're enjoying yourself in San Francisco. I mean, I'm not going to talk about your degrees, but if you've never heard about mate, Federico is the one that convinced me to drink mate. I think I'm pretty happy about it. So thank you, Federico, for that. And regarding the topic, so it's going to be aligned with the other presentation that we had today about CI/CD and automation. And what I'm keen to hear about is the performance verification. What type of verification you place? Sometimes people may think it's a big effort, but at the end it's a quality gate. It's secure your pipeline, secure build. So I'm really keen to hear more about Federico's presentation. So without waiting anymore, I suggest that you start sharing the screen, Federico. So on the right side of Blue Machine's app, there is a share content option.
Okay.
You have share screen.
Ouch, I need to install. Give me 1 second. I don't have it. Try again. Yeah.
All right, I can see a screen. Perfect. I can see the browser at the moment.
Okay, can you see the presentation now?
Now I can see the presentation. All right, perfect. So I'm going to mute myself. I will let you deliver your presentation, and we will connect in 40 minutes for the Q&A.
Okay, excellent. I had a problem with the time travel because, as you mentioned, Henrik, I moved to Berkeley actually 2 months ago, but today, this week, I'm visiting my country, so it's getting dark here. But my name is Federico. I work in Abstracta, where we offer testing services. I co-founded the company 12 years ago, and we are mainly working for companies in the United States, offering automation, performance, and functional testing as well. Today, I want to share an introductory talk about adding performance verifications in continuous delivery, sharing some experiences around the topic from some working for different clients, for different companies, following this kind of methodologies. Well, I want to start with an introduction to the typical approach for doing performance testing, which basically is a waterfall approach where you always run the stress testing at the end of the project, just before the release day, okay? And I want to say some things related to why this approach does not work for continuous delivery. And then I want to talk about different approach that we have been following. But the main thing here is that we have to change our goals around this. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that when we talk about performance, it's not only about velocity, it's not only about response times. We also have to pay attention to the resource consumption, because if we have a great response times, but the application takes 100% of the CPU, the this is not a well-performing application, right? But in this talk, I'm going to focus on the response time analysis and the simulations and analysis we typically do in this side. But of course, we need also to pay attention to the result consumption and use APM tools or monitoring tools in order to find solutions to the problems we detect. Okay. When we do performance testing, what we do is prepare simulations with different tools, and we measure and analyze the behavior of the application in order to find bottlenecks, find the breaking points, and also to answer a very important question, which is, will our system support the expected load with a proper with a good enough performance, with good enough response times and resource consumption. And this is basically what our classic goal with the performance testing. For this, we can use different tools. I have to mention Neotys, of course. The tool I typically use is JMeter. This is my favorite tool. It's open source. I've been using it a lot. But also I tried Gatling and using a lot of Taurus. I wanted to mention BlazeMeter, just to mention this type of tool that allows you to upload your scripts to the cloud and run the script from different virtual machines around the globe, which is perfect for when you need to run larger loads, right? And what we do with these tools is to simulate the user behavior, like different test cases, in a virtual. We convert this into a virtual user, which is in certain way kind of a robot that you can control from few machines and simulate the load on your systems, taking all the response times automatically and allowing your infrastructure experts to use the APM tools and analyze the behavior of the system. So something that we really recommend is to ask real users to access at the same time you are running the virtual users. So you can have like a sensation of the performance that is perceived by real users. And tools like JMeter help you to prepare the scripts with a recurrent playback approach, where you can capture all the traffic between the browser and the server with a proxy and take this traffic and store it as a script that you can run with multiple threads. So in this way, you are simulating concurrent users. And if you need to simulate even more users, this is when you use tools like BlazeMeter in the cloud, uploading your script and running from multiple machines around the globe. This is basically what we do with the tools, but the whole process we follow in the typical approach is define the test cases, the user flows, the load scenario, which is the model. We were talking about models before, but this is the model of the load you are expecting your system is going to have in production. And you want to simulate that. For that, we use the tools to automate the test cases in an HTTP level. I'm using HTTP as the protocol for web applications, but the same thing happens for other protocols. You have to capture in the communication protocol that your clients and your servers communicate. After you have the scripts, you run the tests, analyze the results, and you work with developers and operation teams in order to improve your system and repeat this process until you reach the SLAs or you reach a good enough performance. And as I mentioned before, you typically do that 1 or 2 months before the release date. So this is pretty pressing also for the testers. But the problem is that when we are releasing new versions very frequently, as we do in continuous delivery, you cannot do the same thing. You cannot follow the same process because it's impossible to test that frequently with this approach. And there are certain problems that make this task particularly hard, which is that the scripts are very fragile. The end-to-end scripts, this kind of scripts that you prepare capturing the traffic between the browser and the server, are very sensitive to any change you introduce. So if you run tests every day after every change you make in the system, for sure you will need to maintain those scripts, and it's really demanding. You need to put a lot of effort if you want to do that. And the other problem is that if you run this kind of tests, it's not very simple to find the root causes of the problems you find. Okay, those are the main problems that I find trying to apply the same methodology when you are trying to do continuous delivery. So the question is, what can we do differently? And the first thing is to change our goal, because as I mentioned before, when you do a performance test at the end of your development process, you are trying to answer the question: is the system capable of supporting the load we are expecting? Instead of thinking that way, what I'm considering here is that we are in continuous delivery. Okay, so I already have a version of the system working in production, and I released this version yesterday. Okay, so I'm thinking about the new version that I'm planning to release today. So my focus should be on the differences between one version and the other. But the changes are smaller because those are the changes that I introduced in one day. So the risk is smaller. There is less uncertainty. So our question should be, or our goal should be, to detect any degradation introduced by the new changes as soon as possible. Okay, this is, I think, the main change we have to make in our focus for this kind of methodologies. What I want to talk about this is related to the selection of the tool, definition of the test cases, and the definition of the load scenarios. As I say, I really like JMeter. For me, it's an excellent tool, but I had some issues working with it in a continuous delivery approach, and I want to explain this introducing another tool, which is Torus. Here I'm showing you a very simple script in Torus, which is a YAML file where you can see, I hope you can see my pointer, you can see the script it's just against one URL. We are running only 5 concurrent users, 100 iterations, ramp up 15 seconds, and there are some configurations for the reporting, and I have a pass-fail criteria and acceptance criteria for the test. And this is a very simple example, okay? This test is equivalent to this one in JMeter. Something amazing about JMeter is that it's very simple to learn. It's very intuitive. You have a GUI, very simple to modify the different options and to prepare and understand the script. Okay, but the problem is that this script, which is very simple, is stored in an XML like this. And we are talking about continuous delivery. So we have something that typically happens is that you have to analyze what changed between one version and the other, especially when you find problems. So I want to do something like this to compare what changed between one version and the other. If I do that with the Torus script, it's very simple because the script is very simple to read. It's simple text. You cannot do that as easily if we are trying to do that with XMLs, even with a simple script. And another thing is that Torus is just the scripting language. If you want to run the test, what Torus does is to generate automatically the JMeter script. So it uses JMeter to run the test. It has all the flexibility and all the power of JMeter, and it adds a new feature, which is having the possibility of writing the scripts in a very simple language. So the first takeaway or the first learning I wanted to share is when you are going to choose a tool for performance testing in this methodology, pay attention to the tool and try to choose a tool CI friendly. You know, it's like based on text. You should be able to compare different versions easily because it makes a difference. So let's talk now about the test we want to run. As I said before, we should change our goal. What we want to do is to detect the gradations between one version and the other as soon as possible. So what's the simplest test I can run in order to detect the degradations? And we want to avoid false negatives and false positives, of course, but especially because we are going to run the test very frequently. I say that the end-to-end tests are very fragile, so this is not compatible if we try to run this frequently. So the way something that it really helps me to think about that is to do an analogy with the famous or infamous Cons pyramid for test automation, but thinking about performance testing. And the way I think the equivalence is thinking about the unit test as test for loading one single endpoint in my API in isolation. This is what I consider a unit test here. Then I can think about integration tests as combining different endpoints, and then in the top of the pyramid I have the classic HTTP traffic, the classic scripts simulating the HTTP traffic between the browser and the server. If I go up in the pyramid, I'm measuring the user experience. My test, the design of the test is centered in around the user, but the scripts are more costly, thinking in the scripting and in the infrastructure I need. And if I go down in the pyramid, the tests are cheaper because they are easier to maintain, they are simpler. You can have earlier results. You can run them more frequently because the tests are faster, but on the other hand, we don't have any idea about the user experience. So what I'm proposing here is adding verifications to your pipeline, adding a job in your Jenkins or whatever, or any tool you're using for the automated pipeline, for each endpoint, trying to detect if there is a degradation in the new version with the changes you are doing in the version with this kind of tests, of unit performance tests. For this test, something fundamental is the assertions, because the classic approach is adding assertions according to your SLAs. In this example, in the graph, my SLA maybe is something like this endpoint should respond in less than 500 milliseconds. But the problem is that in these two releases, I had degradations in the performance, but the test didn't give me this information. So the suggestion here is try to put the assertion as tight as possible. So when there is a degradation, the build is going to be broken. So I will pay attention to that, and I will analyze and try to understand what made this happen. Okay. The same with the throughput. You can try to put the assertion as tight as possible with the throughput in order to detect the degradations here. The approach I typically have for defining how many threads I put in the configuration of the test for each endpoint is having an exploratory testing approach. So I play with different configuration, with different tests. So I run different tests with different amount of concurrent users in order to learn how the endpoint behaves. And I can see in this example, in this graph, that there is a bottleneck after 350 threads. So I want to run test. I want to configure a test to run in the future releases with the maximum amount of threads before it starts degrading. So that's why I added my test with this configuration, 350 threads, okay? And I'm checking here that the response times doesn't get worse more than 10%, 10, 15%, it depends on the stability of your system. But the idea is to have a balance between false negatives and have tight assertions. And of course, I'm considering that I need an exclusive, I have an exclusive environment for the execution of the test. I cannot run multiple tests of this type concurrently in order to have repeatable tests. So the second learning I wanted to share is use unit performance tests in order to detect degradations as soon as possible. Okay. Well, is this enough? Is that enough for this for testing the performance of the system? Well, this made me remember something I read from Jerry Weinberg, which is the fallacy of the composition. It's not enough to test the parts in order to understand how the whole is going to behave, because we need to see how the parts interact one with each other, in order to understand how the whole is going to behave. So going again with the pyramid, we can think about running the unit test every day, and maybe running integration test every week, and also using the classic approach every month or every quarter, or maybe before an important release or an important event like Black Friday. the takeaway here is complement this approach of the unit performance test with integration testing and load testing with the classic style, also with a proper strategy. Is that enough? Again, the same question. Something that I faced many times is that you put a lot of effort to improving the backend, and then you go to production and you have a lot of problems in the client side. So the thing here, the only thing I wanted to mention here is don't forget about the client side. Being a performance tester, you also have to pay attention to that. It's not only about concurrency. There are a lot of tools for web. There are a lot of tools like Google PageSpeed, Website IO, Wiselow, and even the APMs give you a lot of information in order to improve the client side as well. For mobile, I haven't found many tools for that. I wanted to mention a project we are collaborating, which is Upteam, that gives you a lot of information about native applications on the client side. So I think it's a good way to learn also about how to improve the performance on the client side in the native mobile applications. Well, this is all I wanted to share with you, this kind of learnings. Especially if you are starting to think about adding performance verifications to your pipeline, I hope you can find something useful in this presentation for you. Thank you so much for your attention, for your time, and I'm here to answer if you have any questions. Thank you. Muchas gracias, amigos.
You're welcome, Federico. So let me, Alexander is still there. I see SK, but SK is not connected. And our next speaker is not even connected. So I will be the only guy doing the Q&A then. Totally. Never mind. So your topic made a lot of sense. I mean, I think fully agree. Because Neotys is similar to JMeter, where we do configuration behind the scenes, but it's going to be XML content, and it's and especially we are to optimize the content. We zip our XML. So even if you start to store a zip into a Git repo, it's going to be just a nightmare, and it's going to be considered like a new file. So it doesn't make sense at all. That's why we introduced the similar language in Taurus. So we have a YAML description file. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think you make the point. And even then, even though when you build pipeline, I think our test is really executed into a context related to the deployment, to the environment. Maybe today we're using Amazon. Tomorrow maybe we decide to change provider. I think the orchestrator, which could be Jenkins or any other CI/CD, I can imagine that we could take advantage of those to set the context, the text execution context. So let's say the server, the definitions, the variables that could define the theme times, the pacing, the whatever. So I think first of all the YAML, I think I'm fully aligned with you. It's easier to detect the changes. But you mentioned about so I really like the fact also that you mentioned the exploratory approach. I think one of the presentation done by Alexander Federico several times, I said that if you want to start automating, and you don't know anything about your system, you need to explore. So I think it's quite aligned with one of the previous presentation done 1 year ago by Alexander, saying that before automating, you need to figure out your systems and and adapt the workload. Because I'm pretty sure that sometimes people says, I know that I'm going to add that amount of hit per seconds, but in a dev environment, pretty sure that you won't have the same, you're not able to do the same hit per seconds. I think it really depends on where you're placing that pipeline, that CI, because usually when you do component testing, I think it's more on the dev pipeline. So are you agree on that? So you should adapt your load with the environment, or what's your thoughts about that?
So the question is related to the environment, if it's on...
Yeah, so more about, like you said, you try to explore and figure out the number of, you said number of concrete threads, but I think more than that, if you know that in production environments, one of your component will be, utilized with, let's say, 200 hit per seconds on a daily basis on average, but generating 200 hit per seconds on your dev environment, I'm pretty sure it doesn't make sense because you don't have the same sizing, you don't have the same stuff. So I think out of the exploration that you're doing, do you think that there is any let's say we could extrapolate the size of our environments to figure out the right numbers? What's your thought about that?
Well, what I can tell you what we were doing in this particular project, which, as the infrastructure in production was really big, we used scaled down infrastructure for the unit tests, because we wanted to reach to this point where you push the endpoint into the border of the breaking point. If we use the production environment, we will need like hundreds of machines in order to get to that point. And I wanted to use only one machine. So I used a reduced version of the infrastructure. So with one machine, I was able to stress each endpoint. And it was enough to explore and to detect the degradations. We weren't trying to extrapolate the results. What we were trying to do is the simplest test to get this information, to detect the degradations. And a degradation in a smaller environment is enough, but it's not enough. Of course, there are other situations when some things get worse in bigger infrastructures, but at least you have an idea or an early feedback for most of the cases in a smaller infrastructure. But we weren't trying to predict what was the exact response times that we were going to get in production. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And also, one other thing that I'd like to that you start by test simpler, or I think it's aligned with the quote that Alexander made with Albert Einstein: make things simpler, but not simpler. So I think when you're unit testing, it's simple, so you can cover a lot of tests. But usually, what I like, I think you don't test the same thing depending on the stages. In component testing, you're fishing for regressions, for problems. Later on the cycle, you will probably test the other requirements. That's why your tests are different, and you're focusing on probably, like you said, maybe web performance and UI.
Exactly.
Do you have any? Do you have any recommendation? So I know that Mark Collinson, we're going to talk about web performance, but is there any specific recommendation into, except of the you mentioned YSlow and other solutions? Because the main pain when you have to do web performance testing and load testing, you have to do two different type of scripts, two different things. It's two different tasks. So sometimes people say it's why do I have to rescript when you have already done it for load testing? But from your experience, do you have any tools that will make the life easier for us? On the web performance side.
Well, the ones I mentioned are the ones we use the most. In some cases, just using the developer extension in the browser, you can get a lot of information, a lot of useful information. But why slow page speed? It depends. We use one or the other depending on how easy is to access to internet. How easy is how exposed is the system to internet, because there are some services that are available. You can use them only if your system under test can be accessed by those tools. And there are other tools that you can use them extension of your browser as Wise Law. So
are you saying that you're doing web performance without any noise on the background? So the service are not utilized, just a single web performance test?
I don't get the question, sorry.
My question was, do you think that you should do the client-side validation, the user experience, by utilizing Whitestone scripts without any load, which means maybe without any, the system is not loaded at all, and you just start measuring how the client side is behaving? Do you do that without load or with load?
Well, we typically do that separately, but because we typically try to give information to the development team as soon as possible. In some cases, as preparing the test takes time, prepare the automation and all of this takes time. So it's good to research on the client side before, so you can give the development team something to improve earlier, But I don't have any experience. I never tried. Now that you mentioned, I never tried to add these kind of validations in the pipeline. I don't know if it's possible. I should check how can you add validations in the pipeline to check automatically in the client side, these kind of things.
I think it really depends, but it depends how the JavaScript has been built. But I may say that if there is, let's say, an API that for, say, to check the card or check whatever, and this API has been slowed down because of the load, I may assume that the JavaScript will be struggle. So it would be an interesting case to measure what would be what would be the user experience in case of that service is being utilized. Would there something happening on the UI where the user doesn't see anything, or basically the UI is completely stuck on the loading? So I may think that it could be worth to test, but again, I'm not doing that on a daily basis. I was wondering what was your opinion about that.
Okay. I don't have experience with this particularly. I think it's a really good idea, but never tried. I always worked on the two sides separately, but you're right that there are many cases where one thing affects the other. So it's, as I mentioned at the beginning, that it's good to have a real user accessing the system while you are doing the performance simulation. I think it also makes sense to do the client-side analysis at the same time you are stressing the system, stressing the backend. I think it's a good idea. Yeah. I'm also learning. I'm not sure. I'm not only sharing my experience. I'm learning from your questions.
Yeah, no. I was just wondering. So sometimes I think it depends. I think a pure web developer will probably say, yeah, there's no impact. You can do it without load. So I don't know, but it really depends on where you position your where you think it could potentially have an impact for the customer.
Yeah.
All right, so it's 1 p.m. Session finished in 3 minutes. I have no other questions. I don't see any questions from the attendees. I see that we have Alejandro Melendez from Perfect connected. He is currently in a hotel room in Boston, I guess. Hi, Alejandro.
Hey. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Can you hear me? Oh,
I can hear you
very well. Yeah, I didn't notice that I was being observed. Thought I was having some privacy, but no, I'm kidding. How are you guys?
Very good. How was your day?
You have been up for a long time now, right?
Now, so I wake up this morning at 3. It's 1 p.m. So it's 20 hours now. We still have 3 hours and 45 minutes to finish the conference. So we're almost there. We're almost.
You just have to wait for 3 more presentations.
Yeah.
And you'll be ready to sleep. Get 1 more Red Bull or something like that.
Yeah, and then I have 45 minutes drive to get home, and so I'm pretty sure that I would arrive at home and it's going to be school time, so I'll have to drop the kids at school and then.
Oh, wow! I don't know how you can do it, man. It's outstanding. I don't have the sombrero to take off, but I give it to you.
So how was your STPCon so far?
We're having a lot of fun. We recorded some podcasts already. We had some Latin American, hey Federico, more brothers from South America. And there were a lot of workshops, learning. Mr. Mark Tomlinson punished me yesterday with his famous performance puzzles. They are, how do they say? They are terrifyingly fun, infuriatingly fun, which they are indeed, but we had a lot of fun, and we managed to solve 2 in the time slot that we were given, which apparently it's outstanding. The record is 3 on a full day workshop. We were only 4 hours. So having lots of fun, meeting lots of people, and I didn't expect to have so much fun. It's outstanding, and I'm happy to report from him.
Nice.
All right. So
Mr. Mark is going to be here as well. We're going to be sharing presentation rooms. Yeah, we'll come up for 8. So he's going to be here soon. We are going to set up all the broadcasting room studio.
So I will make a short break, take advantage of that. I will reach out to the next speaker because I don't see him connected at the moment. And so we will, the agenda is supposed to get back in 15 minutes. So let's make a short 15 minutes break and we'll get back to you. So thanks again, Federico, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks for building those slides and sharing them for the community. It's pretty awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for all the effort preparing this conference.
Thanks.
Bye bye. Arriba.
All right, so let's have a short break. See you.